one's superstars, and we watched the first few minutes of his TOK presentation. There was a lot to admire about it, but we also decided there were some things that maybe he might have done a little bit differently. After this class, I'll post the video of that so you can see the beginning part of Matt's presentation, and you can hear what we were talking about last time. So again, this whole presentation I will put on Google Classroom. Mr. Chisnell will put it on whatever comparable thing he uses. I can't remember what it is.
Chisnell.com, that hard to remember website.
Yes, right, gotcha. So this includes TOK assessment objectives. This is sort of an overriding list of objectives that are applicable to the presentation, which we are going to do the first week of school, and the essay, which will be due toward the end of next semester. I'm not going to go through this stuff, but basically the presentation is around 10 minutes long.
Ms. Barnett?
Go ahead. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure I understood or wanted to correct. It sounded like you said the presentation is going to happen in the first week of school.
Yeah, well, what does that mean? Is that what you want to know?
Yeah, it made me scared, and I'm not even presenting. So are you saying in the first week of school we're presenting, or that we in the first weeks we will be presenting?
Yeah, first week. I mean, the first week though, we will be sort of touching base and making sure we're at a place where we're fine tuning something that's essentially ready to roll. So yes, you're right. You're not going to walk in the school or walk into a virtual school, whatever it may look like, and present that very first day. But pretty early on, since we want to get those done, have some time to go through other areas of knowledge and be able to do a good job with our essay. So yes, thank you for clarifying. It's not day one, but early on. Thank you. All right, so anyone want to join us in talking about the rubric? Those of you who were here, maybe you can sort of highlight some things that we noticed last time.
One thing that we talked about the rubric was the different like wording each of the levels had. And so yeah, the different like wording each level had and like how they were different.
And do you want to highlight a notice you had about some of the differences?
Yeah. The like level 5 said like more sophisticated and it wants you to be super clear. And then even like level 3, it was kind of just the wording was more like just being adequate and acceptable. So like the wording and like the characteristics were ranged differently within the levels.
Thank you. Someone else, a notice you had about the rubric? How about even just speaking to the bold-faced words? How about next name that pops up on my screen is Anna Hill. What's something you notice about one of the bold-faced words?
I think I said this last week, but the knowledge question is clearly related to the real life situation.
Thank you.
The highest one.
So this class is really all about knowledge questions. So it makes sense that it would be so highly prioritized, right? Someone else. Next person who crosses my screen is Alea. Another one of the boldface words. What can you say about one of those boldface words?
Well, it says that in the arguments that like it involves different perspectives.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, so we talked last week about exploring those perspectives. It's not necessarily about answering questions, but to sort of understand how one question often leads us to another set of questions. Anything else that we notice from the rubric? Okay. We obviously will be coming back to this, but this will be for you to take a look at as you prepare over the summer. You'll want to think about those top levels so that we get this do this really well. All right, so Mr. Chisnell was kind enough to find us a sample presentation. We'll look at the rubric after we see this. I don't know that this is a perfect one, and I definitely don't think it's a one on the lower end of the scale, but let's take a look and try to see what this person is doing in this presentation. Oop, not that. Ooh, I linked the wrong thing. No, maybe not. Oh, for heaven's sakes. I know what I did. I didn't hyperlink it. It's not it.
That is not it.
That is definitely not it. I have no idea what it is. Obviously,
Now you have it up.
Okay, here we go. What the heck? Okay.
And we have no sound. So this is where you need to change the sound settings of the presentation computer.
Okay.
And you need to change those sound settings from your microphone to stereo mix, and that should fix it. But just so you know, you are now muted again, and we are having fun captioning you. I'm sending her a text message that mocking her a little bit. Let's see how this is going. Oh, gotta get some still captures of that face when she gets frustrated. The good news about the presentation part, especially if you decide to do technology, is your technology doesn't give you points on the rubric. So if this happens to you in your presentation, no points off. In fact, one of my students last semester got so nervous about the presentation that she stopped about a minute and a half in because she decided she needed to use the bathroom like right away, ran out of the room, came back, picked up her presentation, and everything was fine. No points lost. It's all about content. You could cry like Miss Barnett, and it would not be points off.
Mr. Chisnell.
Hi.
Oh, I got this. Here. This is
We've been talking about you all this time. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Can't hear you though. Oh, I know why.
Yeah, you got to switch your stereo back to microphone. That might do it.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I am struggling here. I'm trying to.
Okay.
Are you able to find it quickly, and then I'll get my.
Yeah, I closed the tab some time ago. Let's see if I can pull it up again.
So sorry, you guys.
Let's see what we got. It's so compelling too. Let's see. Okay, let's see what I can do here for this. Yeah, I'm going to go offline. You won't be able to hear me anymore, but I'll see if I can put it up and play it.
Okay.
So let's do this.
The other day, I was perusing Twitter when this tweet came across my feed. Sammy Rhodes said, "Kesha is what would happen if Comic Sans came to life." I stopped and gave it a good laugh because, hey, it's pretty funny, right? So that's when I stopped and searched everything that was tagged Comic Sans. Morgan McCoy said, "Sorry, but I think I have to drop your class for typing the syllabus in Comic Sans." Creative Mornings provided support for Comic Sans criminals. What I've come up with is people all around the world hate Comic Sans just as much as I do, and have even made support groups, like this one, for helping people deal with their inappropriate usage of this horrible typeface. And then I saw this tweet. What if the only font to exist was Comic Sans? My heart stopped, and I felt sick, because I know, and I hope that you feel like it would basically be the end of the world if this were to happen. But for me, I know I hate Comic Sans, but other people don't. So why is it that I hate Comic Sans, yet there's a small percentage of people that could probably care less? The answer? Aesthetics. After exploring the arts area of knowledge, I was introduced to an interesting concept that made me think. The concept is this. We hold true the idea that there should be standards for judging art. From this, I was introduced to a knowledge issue that perplexed me. How do we know what principles should be used to judge art? To go about answering this question, it's important to understand what is considered art, and why is it important to judge art? From the start, it's obvious that the reason we judge art is in order to define art. If we don't hold standards for what art is, everything could be considered art. Considering that anything you create could be considered art. If there were no standards, we would be written in a world where people think that crayon scribbles is art. But what if it is art? Without principles, everything would be considered art. Being an artist is an acclaimed profession in modern society. Take this Jackson Pollock work, for example. It was sold for $140 million. whereas this scribble is your daughter's kindergarten project that's worth nothing, respectively. But hey, that's modern art for you. It's all about the debate of I could do that versus yeah, but you didn't. This brings up another question. Should art be made for creation or appreciation? If art is made purely for creation, and the process of creating art is more important, then it's irrelevant to have standards to judge art. However, if art is made for sharing on a global basis, it's important to have principles to define art. But what principles should we use? Aesthetics, you say? But here's the problem. How do we judge art based on aesthetic principles when aesthetic principles cannot be defined? The everlasting debate between Comic Sans and Helvetica is a good example of this. Many would argue that Comic Sans is hated so incredibly much because of its aesthetic appeal in comparison to other more aesthetic fonts like Helvetica. In fact, some designers even cringe at the sight or usage of Comic Sans. But what makes Helvetica so much nicer? Many say that Helvetica's versatility is the reason why it's so popular. YouTube users have made countless videos explaining why they love Helvetica, but they hate Comic Sans. In the end, it always ends with the same word, aesthetics. So we've thrown this word around a lot, but what really is aesthetics? First, according to dictionary definitions, aesthetics is defined as pleasing in appearance, or the philosophy of dealing with notions of beauty, even a criteria for judging art, and the study of the mind and emotions in terms of beauty. Is it fair to say that aesthetics is the single most important criteria for judging art? Secondly, from a different perspective, in DP art class, art is judged from basic criteria developed by IB. Concepts such as understanding of ideas and techniques, and appropriate use of materials, inventiveness and expression are all principles outlined in the criteria. From a third perspective, we can look at things from a philosophical approach. Plato explained that beauty is based on what you love. Aristotle believed that to be beautiful, a living creature and every whole must be made of a certain arrangement of parts, and explained that the arrangement of these parts could be boiled down to a mathematical formula, like the golden section. Beauty is math? Golden ratio explains beauty in shapes, and that beauty can be used and defined by a numerical relationship of proportions and symmetry. Another philosopher, Plotinus, said that beauty was defined by integral parts of a coherent whole as perfect as unity or as the principle of unity itself. Darwin's theory suggests that beauty is defined by natural selection. Survival of the fittest and the most desirable is the only way to define beauty in the natural world, where beauty is explained through functionality and a mating partner and successful reproduction rather than visual beauty. Therefore, using Darwin's reasoning, rather than being judged by appearance, it's thought that art should be based on its ability to fulfill its purpose and be functional in expression. Ananda Kumaraswamy, a British scholar of medieval arts, explains that a true work of art should be based on whether it's truly well made and whether it expresses and serves a purpose. Aesthetics is not the same thing as beauty. And therefore, art should not be judged by beauty, but rather a series of guidelines. From a fourth perspective, I took into consideration psychology as an area of knowledge. From a psychological perspective, when considering the social and cultural level of analysis, art cannot be judged by aesthetics. Aesthetics was derived from the concept of taste during the Renaissance, where the upper class defined what fine taste was, and anything else would be considered ugly. From a different perspective, cultural influences could influence the way we perceive art. After all, something that's seen as beautiful in particular cultures is not always beautiful on a global basis. People raised in different environments will view beauty in art in many different ways. Additionally, some people have dark senses and find beauty in things that are not usually perceived as beautiful, like death, darkness, and disease. Finally, from a fifth perspective, my own personal experience with art. This past summer, I had the opportunity to visit Dia Beacon, a modern museum featuring structural pieces based on light. As we were touring, we entered a room that was a series of white walls. And when one of my peers shouted out that this was not art, and in fact it was a disgrace to art, I sat there and considered this. Why was a room with white walls considered art? Our guide continued to lie down on the floor and stared at the wall from a different angle. He explained that if you laid there at 3 p.m. in the winter, you would see the most magical painting you've ever seen before. The colors of the sunset would reflect on the window onto the white canvas of the bare walls. He asked if this painting is more beautiful when you know it's made by Van Gogh and look it up on the internet, or you can sit in this room for any hour of the day and see something new for the rest of your life. The girl was silenced for the remainder of the tour. This tour made me think differently about art, because sure enough, the next day I found myself at MoMA staring at Starry Night by Van Gogh, trying to assess beauty. Considering all of these perspectives, I can attempt to conclude a set of general principles to judge art, considering the idea that individuals develop their own definition of aesthetics that are based off of social settings and simple design concepts. It's nearly impossible to set one form of criteria. In general, I can conclude that aesthetics can be defined as a cohesive piece that provokes expression and fulfills a purpose.
Okay, I should be back. You should be able to hear me, correct? Yes, okay, good. And Ms. Barnett is
I'm
going-
trying to mute myself, but it's not popping up at the bottom where it usually.
Okay. Well, the bird was a nice touch. I think if it was coming from your computer.
I'm
we
quite
were
sure it was.
trying to explore the nature of beauty, of course, and then there was this bird, so it was like, oh, of course, nature. So let's take a moment and just chat a little bit about it. Ms. Barnett may bring up the rubric, but before we go straight to the rubric, can you say a word or two about your impressions of the presentation? Were there parts of it that impressed you, parts of it that surprised you, parts of it that you thought were unsatisfying? Anything like that?
Personally, I was surprised by the fact that she chose to use Comic Sans as her key real life example, because the font itself wasn't made for aesthetic purposes. It was made for dyslexic people so they wouldn't get the letters rearranged. Because each letter is different leading and kerning so that you can't flip them because they don't look similar.
Right.
Well, I found it interesting that she seemed to choose that font without actually looking about why the font was made.
I think that's a really good observation, because I didn't know that either, Emma. But it makes some sense that it would have some functional purpose. When you go to her final synthesis of the definitions, the cohesive idea that serves a function, then you're saying that Comic Sans actually does that, but it's not necessarily an art. So that might be something to think about as you look at your own presentations, is take your RLS, whatever you've chosen, but make sure you know the dynamics of that, its history, its nuances, its complexity. Don't just simplify it. I had a group last year that looked at the burkini. I don't know if you're familiar with it, the cross between the swimsuit, like a bikini, and a burqa for Muslim women. And it was an interesting topic discussion, but I watched my students kind of assume they understood the conflict and the issues going on without actually digging into Islamic tradition and the politics, and that was problematic. So it's an excellent point. What else? What other observations or surprises or disappointments did you have? Did you find it pretty easy to follow? You can see what she was up to right away. One of the things I would give her some credit for, to Emma's earlier point, is she used the RLS, the Comic Sans question, as a springboard for the larger question of what art is. And she used it through the Twitter and blogs that are out there, the YouTube videos, and what's going on there. And that's really what you have to decide, is that your RLS isn't the goal or purpose of your presentation. It's the thing that opens the door for the larger question that she wrestles with. And that in this case is art for her. Anything else that you found surprising or disappointing, you wish she had talked about or she didn't do well? Because we're going to go back and look at the rubric a little bit. So I think Miss Barnett has the rubric. Let's see if she can put it up there and we can take a peek at some of the language there. She's saying she will do that. Yeah, that's the nod. I think even Owen's dog can nod like that. Well, here it comes. There we go. So let's just ask ourselves some of the questions. And really it's a matter of zooming in on that bold type a little bit. Did this presentation have a knowledge question? Oops. Does this presentation have a knowledge question that has a connection to a real life situation? And if so, what level would we call that particular connection? So does it have an identification of the two together? Does it have a specified connection? Is it focused on that? Is it a well-formulated question? And that gets harder. It's definitely not a level 1. We know she's got a specific real life situation, Comic Sans. Now the question is, how well connected is it to the knowledge question she asks? Let me ask it to you this way. What is her knowledge question?
I kind of think that the problems kind of come in, because there's obviously like the connection between the whole idea about how she doesn't find Comic Sans aesthetically pleasing. But I feel like it's just like you kind of have to connect the dots yourself between the real life situation and the knowledge question. I kind of think that's kind of where it falls apart for me.
So your concern is that because that a lot of it's left for us as the audience to draw those connections, that where maybe where it falls short a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good. Other thoughts? Can you identify the knowledge question, even what it was? Assuming that you can't, if you're amongst the people who are saying, I kind of know what her knowledge question was, something about art and beauty and defining it, I think, but I'm not sure, that may be because her knowledge question wasn't focused upon strongly enough. And there's a couple ways to do that. One of the things I would do if I was planning another TOK presentation is I'd have my knowledge question written and it would be slap dab in front of me at the top of the page or top of the screen, taped to my monitor, whatever I'm working on all the time. so that I never lose sight of that. And when I'm presenting, I'm going to make sure I keep circling back to it, so I can make those connections that Rourke was suggesting aren't there. I think she was there, and for the good news is that the TOK teacher is going to, give you the benefit of the doubt, to a degree in the connections that you make. And of course, there'll be meetings along the way to talk about your outline and all, but it's really important, as Rourke is suggesting, to make those connections clear. She whips by her knowledge question really fast, and then she talks about some other related questions that she's got to answer in order to get to the knowledge question. That's good. You need related questions. You need to kind of dig in a little bit. She's doing a lot of digging in, but that knowledge question isn't really clear. And that is, how do we know, or by what standards do we know how to judge art? Right? How can we decide if Comic Sans is better than Helvetica? That's what she's after. And that's kind of what she talks about through the whole presentation, but she isn't hanging on to that really well, right? If it were me scoring just that part of the rubric, right, I would say that it is connected to a specified real life situation. I might give it a 7 out of the 10 scale there, but a level 4. She knows what she's doing. She hangs on to it. She pursues the knowledge question with some sub questions and gets into it in a more complex way. So I'm impressed by that, though I don't know that it's clearly connected in all the ways that we want to, as Rourke is asking. Now let's look at the arguments that she makes. She's trying to pursue on what basis we know art and how it's understood. The Comic Sans is an example of that. How does she do in the context of real life situations and clear arguments? Clear, convincing, or adequate arguments. Again, I don't think she's a 1 or a 2, so we'll just get that one right out of the zone there. What observations do you have about that?
I guess I think there's what she was trying to go for and each of the different situations she went through. Each time she was kind of going through different examples of art and basically saying how should we judge them, but then they all went on their separate different paths, which I kind of thought was sort of going into the next part. What I thought she did really well was she went down all of these different paths and kind of going on, maybe we should judge it this way, or maybe we should judge it based on math, or maybe we should judge it based on our personal experiences. I thought that was really strong, the way that she was able to go down so many paths. But kind of, again, going back to the main point, she just didn't connect them. But I do think that it was really strong how she went down the many different paths and kind of that's what I thought was really strong about it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, she identifies those paths that you're talking about as perspectives, right? So she is gaining down into the perspective area. She does have different perspectives. Now, that word itself, perspective, is pretty open. I've seen this done a couple different ways. Perspectives could be different sides of the argument. But if you could have said, well, here's what the Helvetica fans say, here's what the Comic Sans fans say. But I think that idea of perspectives, it feels more like a pro-con paper. And that's really not what TOK is about. Instead, different perspectives are different ways of knowing, different methods that might be held by certain people, but different ways to reason it. And in those ways, as you say, she approaches a few. She has a few different sections of philosophy and different philosophies that would approach it. Then she gets into psychology a little bit. Then she has her own perspective, or rather her experience at the Art Museum in New York. And those are perspectives. Those are different ways to answer the question, how that question might be answered. Rourke, if I understand you right, your concern was She's got those, but how do they inform her answer to the knowledge question? Is that basically what you were concerned about?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's one thing to say, here are these different perspectives, ta-da, and list them all out. And another one to say, here are these perspectives, and here's what they do to our thinking or my thinking about the knowledge question. And that's the follow-through piece that has to be there. The difference between a wrestling with them, an extensive, effective exploration of them, and an exploration and an acknowledgement or adequate arguments. And I think that you make another good observation is that those connections aren't real clear. What's the point of bringing out a perspective or an argument if you're not going to weigh it somehow in terms of your knowledge question? I felt that was really true of the dictionary definition. I thought, what am I learning about that dictionary definition? So hint, keep Webster out of your TOK presentation. He has nothing to offer us, right? So let's look for some perspectives that are real. So in my head, when I was grading the TOK presentation, I took the whole Webster dictionary part, threw it out, pretended it never happened. And I'm just going to look at the other parts. Had she had no other perspectives after that, she would have been sunk in this area. Fortunately, she had some others, and they were much more substantial, but they may not have fallen in there. Any other observations about where this might fall in the perspectives and arguments area? Would you argue that her arguments therefore were adequate, that she explored them in an adequate way, that she explored them with merely acknowledgement of the different perspectives, or she effectively explored them with convincing arguments and investigation of different perspectives?
Kind of just what I thought from listening to it. It was that she explored them all really, really well, but then she kind of just moved on to the next one, and she didn't explain the differences between them. She didn't explain why it mattered. She just kind of kept going through it, and it kind of left me somewhat unsatisfied when we got to the end, and she said, "Okay, kind of here's what I judge it by based on all that." It just kind of felt like she basically went through all of these different areas and perspectives, but then basically just said, "Okay, that's it. Now I'm done. Here's what I think." So I think the exploration of them was really solid. But again, I think that's just a whole problem with it, is that it's just so unconnected and just so many different paths, but they never cross.
Good. And you're getting into the last criterion, which is the outcomes of the analysis. And let's hang on to that observation for a moment before we go on to that. Other people thinking about the arguments and the explorations, would you call it a level 3, a 4, a 5, or would you really want to slam her and call it a level 2? How many people would say it's a level 2 on this arguments and perspectives issue? Raise your hands. How many people would say it's somewhere in a level 3, a 5 or 6 score? A couple of people are leaning in there. How many would say it's a level 4? It's pretty solid and pretty good explanation for a 10-minute presentation. And how many would say level 5? I don't see anybody there. Good. I think that's, and I mean, it would really have to be exceptional. One of the things to think about when you look at different perspectives and the arguments you choose is it's better to choose a few arguments and explore them at length than it is to try to cover lots of perspectives and arguments and touch upon them quickly. So I thought the fact that she had 5 perspectives was probably too many for a 10-minute presentation. Had she taken 3 or even 3 of the different philosophical ones and just dug into those at length then we might have had a higher score. In my head right now, I'm fudging between level 3 and 4. I'm either at a 6, maybe. I don't think I would go as low as 5, because again, implicitly they were all there, but I don't know that she explored them as well as she might have. And then finally, Rourke has already offered us a quick idea of the outcome. She brings it together. She has 3 points at the end, which she's got very clearly established that that's her perspective. That's her answer to her knowledge question. On what basis do we know? And then she defines the notion of art and aesthetics, which was a pretty powerful thing to do. Would we say that this was some awareness of the significance of the question? They shown to be significant to the real life situation of Comic Sans, shown to be significant to the chosen real life situation and to others. Oh. Right away, one of those should shout out as being not appropriate as a score. How many real life situations does she have? 1, theoretically. 2, Emma's thinking of another one. Which one are you imagining?
She also mentions the art gallery.
Yeah.
And she uses that for like a pivoting point in her argument.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Emma. I think she doesn't label it as a new RLS or a new example to explore. She labels it as a perspective, but that doesn't mean we can't give her credit for looking at it and saying that was another real life situation and she used it to inform her opinion. So you could argue that she's got 2, but it gives us a thought that you should be looking for a couple of examples, not just one RLS, one to start, but find some others, hopefully from other fields, to inform your idea. The thing that made me disappointed in her examples was that they all came from art. And aesthetics crosses lots of natural sciences, as she touched upon briefly when she got to Darwin. But we never came back to that and never really used that. And so there's an opportunity to get some real perspectives from different RLS areas. And she also mentioned math as beauty. She mentions it briefly and then flies past it and doesn't come back to that notion. I went, wait, there was something there. And so that's something that she could have explored in a lot more detail. For me, I think, and because I know we're short on time, the thing that I would look at with that to me was definitely a level 3. I thought the outcome came about, which I was glad that she did, but I don't know that she connected in a way that showed the significance of her findings. And it was hard to see how she emerged from that. Here's the thing I said last week that comes really important. Rourke called it connecting the dots. I described it as showing your thinking. She does talk about her thinking a little bit, but really lay that out for us. How you got from point A to point B to point C. And if you ran into a dead end, don't be afraid to say it. I tried this out and this just didn't work for me. So I came at it from another angle. Talking about how you think about this is half the rubric right there. So we need to see that get pointed out very explicitly. Overall, my guess is that she got a 6 or a 7 on this presentation. The reason that I say that, that I'm not certain, is because I haven't seen her PPD. And that's the form you need to fill out. So I'm going to stop talking there. And then I think Ms. Barnett's got a PPD of some kind to show us as well. Fancy acronym.
Yes. Thank you for that nice segue. I am pretty disappointed that I didn't hear the captions that were given to my struggles. I'll stay after, and Mr. Chisnell can fill me in. All right.
There's
So
some screenshots and memes that you'll hear later.
Oh God. Okay. I'm excited. All right. Well, so here's an example of this form that you and I are going to be filling out. This particular presentation was done by a really outstanding student in cohort 1, and he explored Juul cigarettes. And so the title was Juul Wants to Combat Teen Vaping. You can see that his presentation was 10 minutes. I think, Mr. Chisnell, about 8 to 10 minutes is pretty typical.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We don't, you should be holding it to 10 minutes ideally. There's a Q&A as well that occurs, which we didn't see here with this presentation.
Okay. So in this presentation form that we submit this part to IB, the student describes the real life situation. So this is about Juul, the e-cigarette company, claiming that they're taking precautions, but their lobbyist actions, the legislation they've supported, and the actions they have taken all undermine this claim. So from there, he takes that real life situation and he explores his central knowledge question, which is, to what extent can language be used to influence and justify ethical knowledge? Then he goes on to explain the connection. And this, again, I will be videotaping you when you do this, but it's mostly for our purposes, so we can go back and really think through, make sure we are giving you the benefit of the doubt in terms of your thinking. But what IB is going to want is this form. So this is how we signal to them the kind of thinking that happens in that presentation. So there's this explanation that he does. From there, there's an outline, and he touches upon the main ideas that he goes through in his examples. And then this is where he explores the significance of his conclusions. So we were just talking about on the rubric, that idea of significance, and he puts it here. And again, like Mr. Chisnell said, if you're doing it right, that question is pounded into your head, public, maybe on your screen. It is right in front of your face. And every example you use, you make sure you are thinking about that question. And even as your question leads to other questions, you're still really clear in your mind what that original knowledge question is. And so he was able to do that. And then this part is where the teacher, in this case, I will be talking about what you do, and I'll especially be looking for the things you do well, the things you do right, and the things that make me want, if you're between two numbers on the rubric, to justify why I would put you at the higher one. So I'm going to show you another one because I thought it was kind of interesting. So hold on one second. Will I be able to find it?
Ms. Barnett, could you take Nathan's and scroll backwards on that just a little bit first?
You bet. You bet. You bet. Wait.
Oops. Okay, right. Let's see. Significance. One more back up. There we go.
This?
Yeah,
Yep.
That's the outline. No matter how you form that outline, that's the guts of the PPD. How you frame the other questions are important, but what you put in the outline is basically the content of your presentation. Remember that IB won't see your presentation. They're going to see this form, which means if you have any thinking and connections to make them there, and perhaps full sentences so that they can say, oh, wow, this person really was thinking through this and got those ideas. So that was important. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm noticing the time, so I don't think I'll show you other students, but I will put them, I'll modify it. I won't let you see their scores. But some of the other students did a really nice job, I thought, outlining their work and signaling to the IB readers what their thinking was. So you will be, be giving you a clean copy of this so you can begin planning. And then the other thing that I would like for us to do in the next month, so today is the 4th of June, before the 4th of July, I would like to schedule an individual meeting where you can talk to me about some of your ideas, and I can maybe coach you a little bit. Maybe I can help you find some resources. And I think I'm just going to invite you to email me and give me a couple options. I would think a half hour is all we would need. But I want you to think about what your real life situation would be and play around with it before you write to me. There's so much going on right now. And I wish we had time to really explore that, but between school closure, COVID-19, all kinds of issues related to COVID-19, and this last week with George Floyd and all of the fallout, there's a lot to think about. And you know, as I think about the 12 weeks apart, I have been worried for you. I've been worried for the world, really, as far as how we handle all of the confusing times. But I was thinking this afternoon that this could be a really cathartic way to think through some of the real life issues that are very big right now. And it might help you to sort of process your own knowledge that you are creating on the fly as the times go. Mr. Chisnell, did you want to add something about that? We thought we would brainstorm topics, but did you want to add to that idea?
No, but I think as you look for RLSs, as you look for different topics that are there, I guess I would say, remember that you've got a 10-minute presentation, and you might at this moment want to take on the most grand social, global, issues that are there. I would, in this particular case, I would kind of recommend against that. Instead,
Okay.
Zero in, as you were just doing with your hands, Ms. Barnett, is taking on the smallest topic can sometimes yield the largest results. And, one of the things that you might have seen with Nate's is that he had one RLS on vaping, but it introduced a much larger question to which you can make all kinds of connections. So we don't have to take on racial reform and what post-racial societies in the United States look like. We don't have to look at the U.S.'s leadership or lack of leadership in a global pandemic. Those are not good RLS places to start. Start small, start with something that is perhaps unique, original, specific, even historical, and then let it see where it leads you. And that's the trick to making this an original and profound presentation.
Emma, did you want to add something? No. I wonder if maybe we could start a common doc where people could throw out some ideas. I could put that on Google Classroom if you thought that would be useful. Again, there's a lot to process right now, but I really think Mr. Chisnell's caution about going way too big could really serve you well. But as you look for those real life situations, you might be able to see a much smaller scale situation that could bring you good results. Or maybe it's something totally different and you haven't, maybe you need to go through your journals or look for something entirely new. All right. I will be posting examples on Google Classroom. I know Mr. Chisnell will as well. If you could email me with it by July 4th and set up a time when we can talk, and I just want to hear some of your ideas and some of your plans, and I can help you begin to outline your presentation. That sound fair? Okay, guys, finish strong, please. I know this has been tough. I know this has been a challenge, but you just get what you can get done. Be good communicators with your teachers, please, please, please. Everybody wants to see you succeed and get your work done, but if you have questions, please be a communicator. Okay, fine? Yes, Mrs. Barnett. Okay, great. All right, guys, I will hope to talk to you soon. Maybe send me a couple options and we'll set up a time when we can talk.
Okay, thank you all.